China is an economic power, and the two leading U.S. presidential candidates want to keep it in check.
There's a rivalry between the US and China.
So what economic plans do Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have for China? Many Chinese believe Harris is arrogant and Trump a villain. Will the trade war between the US and China intensify? And what does it mean for the world? Trump sees China as an enemy. If he wins, he is planning tariffs of 60% on Chinese imports, and that would make the goods 60% more expensive.
If Trump were to impose tariffs on, say, toys, things that are quote-unquote harmless in terms of industrial policy, that's a different ballgame. Computers, computers are a big item. So that would change really the nature of trade between the two. The objective would be to decouple.
Trump seems to be dreaming of a long-gone 1950s USA, which had a strong manufacturing base. And he plans to further restrict technology transfer to China, for instance, by banning US investments.
The Chinese leadership, Xi Jinping himself, fears the absence or the constraints on technology transfer more than anything else, because that's the key for China to reduce its technological dependence from the US to become self-reliant.
Kamala Harris speaks of de-risking. That would be a continuation of the Biden administration's China strategy. It has, for instance, placed export restrictions on US-made high-tech chips, and the White House also slapped tariffs on goods, including Chinese electric vehicles. It wants to protect domestic production and reduce dependence on the Chinese market.
Inquiries in part showed that there was significant reliance on Chinese chips even in the US military, and that had to be considered a security risk. That's why it's not just about economic policy and competition. It goes way beyond that.
While as vice president, Harris has been pushing for collaboration, which she hopes to continue as president, she has also been advocating for a hard line towards China.
I will never hesitate to take swift and strong measures when China undermines the rules of the road at the expense of our workers, our communities, and our companies.
It doesn't matter who wins, it's hard times for China. But do the Chinese still have a preference?
Because Trump is basically thinking of isolating the US further from its allies, from Europe, from Japan, that gives China an edge, because the US is much less powerful and scary for China in terms of containment if the US isolates itself.
That would also mean China would have free rein for its global economic expansion plans, despite a deeper trade war with the US. So how would the rest of the world be affected?
It's quite amazing. Already now, Southeast Asia, actually even Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and ASEAN, now their largest export market is the US. It's not China anymore. Because, at the end of the day, it's very hard to keep that distance. On the one hand, the US protects me. On the other hand, China is my main market. So I think countries will need to choose. That's what I mean, being squeezed by the two.
Security interests come before trade, and that applies to both Harris and Trump. And both want their country to be on top technologically and economically, much like the leadership in Beijing.